Howdy do, neighbor. It's Berean Spirits time once again. The boys have gathered around, and they're ready for you. So join in, make comments, and study with the guys as they try to study as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. And now, here's the guys.
It's that time again, so buckle up, Buttercup. We're going to get going on our program today, talking about working with others. My name is Chris Peltz. I'm the evangelist with the Southside Church of Christ here in Springfield, Missouri. We've got Josh Thornhill with the Westside Church of Christ over in Wichita, Kansas. Josh, I'm glad you're not blown away just yet. How you doing?
I'm good. We actually haven't really had much bad weather of late.
Yeah.
It's all just skirted right around us. So, I mean, it's not terrible, but we're good. We're good.
Awesome. We got Richard Dodson with the Kearney Church of Christ up in Kearney, Missouri. Richard, you doing all right, brother?
Did I hear you say Buttercup?
That's right.
No, he's not talking about peanut butter cups, Richard.
Buttercup?
Buttercup. Buckle up, Buttercup.
That sounds like a name of a horse.
Does
I guess it's the month of the Kentucky Derby, so I guess maybe that's why.
Oh, yeah.
Buttercup.
Yeah. Yep. But I guess you're doing good then.
I was.
You was?
Buttercup confused me, but okay. We got Rita here. We got Marty here. We got Linda here. I mean, we got, I guess, a lot of the old gang showing up. Awesome.
There's some new features on this whole software deal that we use. It talked about with comments as you read comments, you can put them in like a some kind of background or grayed out feature, so you know which ones you've read or used or shown. I don't. There's some new little features that they're coming up with all the time with this program. It's kind of neat.
Oh, yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah.
They are coming up with features so fast I can't keep up with them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, Richard, you've been working on some graphics, right? Some artwork for us for the programs, and you've putting together some memes. That's pretty cool. You put together a new meme for us for today's program, talking about working with one another. And so, these things, I know a lot of times they're comical, but man, they can really make a point. And so I think it's pretty neat. I'm glad you're working on that and doing that for us. But today's program is going to be about working with one another. And there's all kinds of passages that talk about that. I mean, you could just search the phrase one another, and the number of text in the New Testament alone is going to really bring out the idea that God desires us to have a mindset of looking to helping and being a part of a one another type community. There was a phrase that has stuck with me that I heard years and years ago that, laboring and working, with a local church is expressed in one anothering one another. And, it sounds kind of silly, but I think it really does illustrate the mindset that we should be having, especially when you look at a text like Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 16, where it talks about being knit and joined together, by which every part does its share. And so that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today and making some applications today, because it first and foremost, probably what people think of is, how it is we work together within a local congregation. And so that's probably where we ought to start. I think it goes beyond that. There's some things that we can do individually outside the scope of the local church in and of itself, just as Christians and as neighbors to those around us. But let's start with the local church, Richard. When you think about all of the things that are involved in a local congregation, really just working and functioning, in a way that is that not only is proper but that is beneficial. There's a lot that goes into that just in and of itself.
People skills. At least that's the phrase they use at companies, when they're looking to hire people. A lot of times they hire people, and that's one of the things they have that they're very concerned about is, how good are you at working with other people? And that does take skill. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into learning to deal with others, and it is a skill. It is something you have to work at, and that's the way it is with any job. Um, that drawing that I had AI create, that logo, or not logo, but that poster that you're talking about, showed two people using a cross saw to cut wood. And that didn't just happen. I mean, two guys just don't get on there and start doing that, because they kind of have to learn that, when the other's getting ready to push and the other's getting ready to pull, they have to kind of time that right. And I can recall one time when my wife, well, we were at the school she works at, and we were putting up chairs, and they put the chairs on rollers, and this one woman is going to help me roll these big set of chairs into the where they keep them, the closet, whatever you want to call it. And we just, she's wanting to pull, I'm wanting to push. It's not working right. My wife went up to her and she said, "Here, I kind of know how he thinks." And my wife got on the end, and I mean, we just zipped it right on in, no problem whatsoever. And it just made an impression on me, about how through marriage we had learned to work together and to function. And just like those guys on that cross saw, you got to learn to work together. And that's the way it is at church. We have to understand there is a work of the church that we are all involved in, and it takes skill in getting better at it. And that only happens through practice. We have to work with each other. And there's a lot of passages, like you said, that go along with learning this, that go along with helping us become better at it. But we can become better, but it's not going to happen if we don't practice.
Absolutely. And that practice, oftentimes they talk about, the practice, and there's the R's, right, of getting better: repetition, repetition, repetition. And certainly that is true. Sometimes it means we've got to get out of our comfort zone. Sometimes it means that, we've got to do things that we're not comfortable with, that aren't exactly, in line with our personality, as much as setting aside those things, such as, being outgoing and talking to visitors. Sometimes that takes a lot of effort, a lot of work on somebody's part, whereas others, are much more kind of natural at doing those types of things. But it's one of those things that, we can complement one another with those things, meaning, we try and we do our best to do some of the things that we're not the greatest at, right? But then there are others that, that we work alongside, who are very good at it. And, we just kind of, we can learn from one another, we can grow with one another. And, putting our skills together, we can see just how much a congregation can influence, whether it is visitors, whether it is, young Christians, old Christians, regardless of all of that. We can, really show our desire to not only please God, but to glorify Him and to have an influence on others. Josh, when you think about working with one another in a local work, in a local congregation, there's things that go on behind the scenes, as well as, people that are standing up before congregations leading, whether it is in prayers, in congregational singing, or, heading up the Lord's table, preaching. There's all of those things that everyone sees, but sometimes there's things that are going on behind the scenes that isn't necessarily seen, that we've got to work together at.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 talks about, actually the book of 1 Corinthians is a good book to look at as far as this whole topic is concerned. But he's dealing with the fact that the Corinthian brethren are bickering with one another. They're not working together very well, as it relates to their usage of spiritual gifts. And I think part of that starts with an improper paradigm in the first place, because they've got this idea that these gifts are the better gifts, and I've got this gift, and so I'm better than you. And I think Paul's trying to turn that on its head. And speaking in tongues may seem cool, but it's not the most edifying of gifts. It's the most visible, and it's the easiest way, perhaps, to display your gift of the Spirit. But that led to some contention among the brethren. And what Paul says there is that there is a diversity of parts. There's a diversity of people. And he asks the question, if the foot says, because I'm not a hand, I'm not part of the body, is it for this reason any less a part of the body? Well, no, it's still a part of the body. But if the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, am I not part of the body? Is it for that reason not, or any less part of the body? And then, he continues to make application to that. If the whole body were the eye, where would the hearing be? If the whole were the hearing, where would the sense of smell be? Yeah, and so part of his point was that there is a diversity, and that diversity is intended to complement one another. Without being too graphic, the male and the female complement one another physically. And that's why God put man and woman together in that marriage relationship. And so the body is going to be comprised of a diversity of people, with each with different talents and abilities and gifts and all sorts of different things that they can bring to the table. And that creates an opportunity to be able to work together and to accomplish more than the sum of its parts. There's a couple of books that I would recommend in relation to what we're talking about today to help us to be more effective in working with others. One of them is called The Next Conversation by Jefferson Fisher. I'm talking about arguing less and talking more. Just some practical tips to be able to have good, solid conversations. Another one is Crucial Conversations, when talking when the stakes are high. And that's some positive stuff that adds some stuff that there's some overlap, but there's also unique things in each one of those. And then another one is 7 Habits for Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And all of those just give some practical ideas. Number one, for communication. As there's a quotation in the Crucial Conversations book that says the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Which, there you go. That's a free nugget there. But each of those books have practical ideas that can help you to work together in a group, particularly like what Paul is describing there in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where you have diversity, where you have different gifts and different ideas and different perspectives that are being brought to the table, and learning how to mesh those together and be united as one body despite this diversity. And Paul says that it's possible. I think sometimes it's not working out that way in a local church because people are self-oriented, self-centered. But if we learn to be more group-centered, group-oriented, then we can be more effective in the working of the body. It's part of what Paul says in Ephesians 4 and verse 16, the effective working in which each part does its share causes the growth of the body for the edifying of itself in love. And so it's not one person, or as the saying goes, 10% doing 90% of the work. It's all hands on deck, everyone working together, everyone linking arms together to accomplish the task that God has given. And one of the things that I was wanting to bring up about that one book, I think it was The 7 Habits. He talks about when you have two people working together, it often creates more than the sum of its parts. If you were to take one piece of wood, just a board, and you were to max out the limit of that board, let's say it was 100 pounds that it could hold before it shattered or snapped. If you put two boards of the same width and exact same boards together, you'd get more than 200 pounds. It would be more than the sum of its parts. And so when we work together as the body is intended to, we can accomplish more than the sum of its parts, more than one person can accomplish by himself, or more than two people by themselves can accomplish. When they work together, they can accomplish more. So we're intended to work together. God didn't throw us out here on our own in order to just kind of wade out into the deep and hope for the best. He's given us a group that we can work together with. And I guess the biggest challenge is learning to work together, overcoming some of those issues that Corinth had in order to be able to be that functioning body where every part is doing its share.
I really love the illustration, with the board and the idea that it does so much more than the sum of its parts. When you look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 12 through 21, 22 in there, it talks about how we are all individual members of one body. And though many parts, we are still just one body. But, while one part, right, one member can only do so much by itself, when we're together, a part of that body, so much more is accomplished. So much, is able to be done as we work and labor together and helping one another. Individuals that take on tasks such as preparing the Lord's Supper, cleaning a building, that take on certain maintenance work. Individuals that take on, work of, like, we have deacons sometimes in local congregations where, they're checking in and making sure that if there's some kind of physical need that needs to be taking place, whether it is at, the grounds that the church owns, or, a physical need of one of the members, and reporting back to an elders or the men of the congregation, and maybe letting some of the ladies know, and everyone moving into action, right? Taking advantage of their own skills and their own skill set. And then as that all works together, great things are accomplished, right? It may seem like something small, like one little cup of water given, as Jesus had mentioned at one point, just a cup of cold water in my name given. And yet, when others see that and they jump into action, and they, so much more is given, then so much more is accomplished. Richard?
Well, when I'm thinking about working with others, I'm thinking about the first thing that we have to do when we're thinking about working with others is having the mind to work.
Mm.
We go back to Nehemiah when they came back to Jerusalem to rebuild their homes, and they were coming back from bondage in Assyria. And what did they do? The Bible says in Nehemiah 3, they started rebuilding the walls, and they had a mind to. I'm sorry, that was Nehemiah 4. They had a mind to work. And so we have to have a mind to work if we're going to want to go to and be a part of the Lord's church. Now, a lot of times, what I have experienced and what I've seen, sadly, is there's a lot of people that just want to come to church and sit in the pew. And that is most unfortunate. They don't want to do anything. But yet then when the song leader gets up there and he, calls out the song that we're going to sing, everybody sings. And one of the songs we sing is Here Am I, Send Me. And everybody sings it, but does everybody mean it? And it's really easy for 3 or 4 people to do all the work. And that's not good. We need to all have the mindset, as Josh pointed out that one day, we need to all come to church wearing an apron, looking to serve, instead of coming to church wearing a bib, looking to be served. And if we have that, we got to ask ourselves a question: what even makes it a church? I mean, what makes it the Church of Christ? If people are coming to be entertained, that's not a Church of Christ. The Church of Christ is a place where we do the work of the Lord. We work together. And so and that's one of the traits in working with others, is you first have to have the mind to work. If I was to go and do some task with Josh, and I'm sitting there trying to do the work, and then Josh is preoccupied reading the newspaper or playing on his phone, we're not working together. And the reason we're not working together is because he doesn't have the mind to work. And so that's the first and foremost thing, is we have to have a mindset to work. Now, once we have that, then there's other things that come into play in working with others. But until we have that same mindset to actually do the work, then we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. One of the most popular people in every congregation is somebody. And one of the busiest people in every congregation sometimes is nobody. Everyone's thinking, well, that needs to be done. Somebody will do it. Yeah, somebody needs to do this. Somebody needs to do that. They're the most popular person in the congregation. And yet, when everyone is relying on somebody, guess who is stuck doing the work? Nobody. They get no credit. They're the ones doing the work. In fact, that means the work isn't getting done. And so, unfortunately, that's what many people find themselves in, a situation relying on somebody else to get things done rather than jumping in and doing the work. In Galatians chapter 6, starting in verse 1, it talks about a brother being caught up in a trespass. And he doesn't say the most eloquent of speakers, doesn't say the wealthiest, it doesn't say, the retired, it doesn't say, whatever situation you may find yourself in. It says, you who are spiritual, restore such a one. And that really kind of can be a slap in the face, because you can think, wait a minute, am I spiritually minded? Am I the one who is thinking spiritually? Am I the one who's thinking about the needs of others, the desires of others, and the working of a local congregation, for example? And what part am I playing? Right? Am I becoming the somebody who's doing something, or am I sitting back and letting nobody take, do everything? And that's where we've got to sit down and really examine ourselves and find out, what role are we doing, and what role can we engage in, right? And that can be a difficult thing sometimes, because sometimes there are a lot of people who can hear very well. Sometimes there's a lot of people that can do certain behind the scenes things, but we don't have class teachers. We don't have song leaders. And sometimes, we have to step up and get out of that comfort zone and be willing to, as Richard pointed out, be willing to do the work, to be workers and have that mind to work. And sometimes it's not the job we're best suited for, or at least we don't feel as though we are in our own minds, but it is the job that needs to be done. And so that's the job that we've got to partake in.
Can I comment on that real quick?
Oh, sure.
I can remember, and I think Chris knows this. I mean, we just had Chris for gospel meeting. I remember his first sermon, and it stunk. I mean, it absolutely stunk. And then I can remember
You
going
sure?
off.
Never mind.
I can remember going off and preaching in different communities when I started. And I remember one church not asking me to come back, and I kind of agree with it. I think they did right. I
Mhm.
was not very good. Uh, People have asked me why I preach, and my most common answer is, "Well, I'm willing," and I was willing then, and I'm still willing now, and I'd like to think I got better. I know Chris got better, and God willing, we're going to get Josh there too someday. But be that as it may, we got to understand that you got to have a willing heart first and foremost. And you may not be very good at the work, but if you got that willing heart, then others are going to have to be patient and try to develop you in that task because we truly need different people doing different skills and getting better at it. We had our song leader leave us not too long ago. I mean, it's been a few years. And a lot of times when he was out or gone, I would have to lead singing, and that I'm getting older. It's harder for me to lead singing and preach. And so I can remember, I just asked the members, I said, does anybody want to try being a song leader? And we had a member said, I'll give it a go. And, I was listening to him Sunday and I thought, wow, he's really gotten better. And so, he had a willing heart and he was willing to make a go of it, and he has improved. And so, I cannot emphasize enough about coming to church with the attitude of working. It doesn't matter where you're at as far as what level you're at, but just getting started, because you're not going to get any better until you get started. And then hopefully the members are going to work with you to help you become better. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick.
Go ahead, Josh.
Real quickly, you talked about everybody, somebody, anybody, nobody. There's a story about those people. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done.
That's it.
And if that's not how some local churches operate, then anyway, one of the first places my mind was going when we were talking about working with others was 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And it is important to recognize our responsibility, our is to work together with the people of God. That's what a local congregation is a group of Christians that have gathered in a location to work together. But I want to recognize or acknowledge the fact that we are working together with God. Paul tells us that in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, when he is dealing with some of the contentions among the Christians in Corinth, again, as they're, aligning themselves with the preachers. I'm of Paul, I'm of Apollos, I'm of Cephas, I'm of Christ. He's trying to give them some perspective there, beginning in verse 5, when he says, what then is Apollos and what then is Paul? Servants through whom you believed, even as the Lord gave to each one. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but God who causes the growth. Now he who plants and he who waters are one, and each will receive his own reward according to his labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building. And so what he's saying is we're working together with God's people, but we're also working together with God himself. God, in chapter 1, It said it pleased God through the foolishness of the message preached to save those who believe. God could have chosen any way that he wanted. He could have chosen to have people, when they stand on one foot and jump around in circles and with their hand on their head, and they could be saved that way. He could have chose any number of different things, but he chose the preaching of the gospel to be the means by which we are saved. And you know what he's done is he's entrusted me and you. We are God's fellow workers. He's saying, I'm going to give you a gift through the preaching of the gospel that I expect you to work together with me to propagate, to continue to share, to continue to sow, to build in this kingdom. And so God has chosen to work together with us so that his will could be accomplished. Now, let that sink in for a moment. The God of heaven, the creator, has decided to work together with you. Now, number one, that's pretty impressive. That's pretty cool. But also, that's a pretty heavy responsibility that we have. God has chosen for us to be co-workers with him, and then we can be co-workers with his people as we are accomplishing his task. And so I think some of that in our working together with one another, I think we need to remember that ultimately we're working for God. Ultimately, that's what we're doing. We're working together with him. And so when it comes that there's maybe some disagreements or some personality disruptions or whatever, just remember that ultimately our work is with the Lord, and we're trying to accomplish his purposes because he has entrusted us, just as he's entrusted those other people that we're having, that we may be having issues with. He's working together with them too. And so we're all on the same team. We're all in the same field, working for the same end, working together with the same God, trying to accomplish the purposes that God has given us. And so we have work to do, as Richard pointed out, and we need to have that willingness and the desire to work. But we need to have that perspective that we're working for the Lord. And so all of our efforts should be toward that end. And real quick, I think one thing in our culture, work has almost become a bad thing. Work is a necessary evil that allows me to fund whatever hobbies that I want to do, what I'd rather be doing. And there are people that would rather spend their time doing anything else except for work. And even people who go to work, they say, well, I guess I got to go to work. And, oh, man, I can't quit or whatever. And then we hear about people who have the money to retire right now and never work another day in their life, and yet they're still working. Why? Because it's purpose. God has given us a sense of purpose that's centered around work. That's who we are created to be, workers. Now, rest is a good thing, but it's not the most important thing. Rest is important because it helps us to recharge ourselves so that we can get back to what God has given us to do. That is work. And so we need to remember that we are working together with God, with others, because that's what we're created to do, work. And so we need to be busy like Jesus was in Luke chapter 2, busy about the Father's business.
So many passages that reflect the very ideas that you guys have already stated. Ephesians chapter 4, I mentioned earlier, verse 16. But if you were to continue the reading, let him who stole steal no more, verse 28 or so. He talks about laboring with your hands to provide for yourself and for those who are truly in need, right? I mean, working and laboring. Paul in Acts chapter 20 and verse 30, 35 or so, he talked about how he labored, all right, and provided not only for himself but for those who were with him. You've got, just one passage after another where, first of all, you have to consider one another. Hebrews 10 verse 24. You have to think about the needs of others. If you're going to be able to help them and work with them and provide for them. But as Josh went through and he found that and read that idea, the everybody, somebody, anybody, nobody thing, everybody got mad at somebody because because nothing was getting done. You think about when we're not working together, the discouragement, right? There are those who, class teachers who get into a situation where they're teaching a class, year round, and they don't have the benefit of learning, maybe in an adult class because they're teaching a kids class, and no one else wants to jump in and help, and the discouragement that arises from that when you have a song leader who would need a break and no one's willing to help out and do that, and then it becomes more of something that you feel as though you're isolated, you're the only one, and if you don't do it, it won't get done, and that puts a lot of weight on somebody. That puts a lot of just stress on somebody, and that's what we're talking about, is working together to relieve some of that, having that mind to work so that one person isn't left doing everything. And just think about that in your jobs, right? Sometimes people feel like they're the only ones doing anything at their work, because all the union folks are out on smoke breaks and coffee breaks and doing everything else other than their job, and then someone is stuck in there getting everything else done. It becomes extremely frustrating, and the same is true with the church as well, which is why we've got to not think about the role of everyone else as much as, what can I do within the realm of the authority of the role that I can play? What can I do to help the body of Christ to not only grow but to function and work and labor in a way that is productive rather than destructive. Richard?
You're muted.
He
Sounds great, by the way. But
I had to cough and I muted myself. So I want to talk about working with Superman and the struggles with that, because there is a personality that is hard to work with, and that's the person who wants to do everything, and they feel like everything they do is better than what anybody else can do, and they just they're just bound and determined. When you try to do something, they just kind of look down upon your work, but then they want to take it over. Then they're very happy with doing everything. That's a struggle, and that's not a Christ-like attitude. Um, what they fail to understand is there are like Ecclesiastes 4 talks about how two are better than one because they have a good reward of their labor. They're missing out on the teaching there. But even if they are better at something, they still have that responsibility from Ephesians chapter 4, because it says in verse 2 that with all lowliness and gentleness and with long suffering, we bear with one another in love, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. So we have to bear with one another, even when our skills haven't developed where maybe somebody else's is. And so what we do is we try to help them improve. And we don't try to help them improve by just not letting them do any work. We try to encourage them in the work that they're doing, even if we feel like we can do it better or somebody else is doing it better. I'm reminded of a story, true story. This really did happen. there was a brother who was studying music at a university, and he was at church, and there was a song leader who started leading singing, and the song service was not going so well. The song leader wasn't very good. And this brother stopped the song service right in the middle of the song. And he steps forward and he said, People, he goes, this is not worship. This is horrible. This sounds horrible. And he looked at the song leader and he said, If you want, I will come up there and lead the song for you. Now, he came and told me what he did. I said, You need to go back and apologize to that church. And he ended up doing that. But, there was someone who was willing. They weren't doing a good job, but they were willing. And instead of being overly critical, especially to that point, and I'm using this as an extreme example, we need to see what we can do to help those who are willing become better. Don't just try to take the job away from them thinking, oh, I'm the only one capable of doing this. I'm the best one. I got to do it. No, look toward making other people better. And that's part of working with other people. And sometimes they may not be willing to do it. Sometimes you're going to have to coax them to do it. That's part of it. There's going to be problems along the way with working with others. But if we are patient and bearing with them, then, you know, people can become what the Lord wants them to become, and the work will get accomplished.
Yeah. And that's really, I think, a part of the one of the main keys of this is not only being patient with one another, but trying to help others to develop, not just doing everything yourself or expecting someone else to do everything themselves, but that working together. Otherwise, what is accomplished isn't going to be glorifying to God if we're not working together. And there will be discouragement, there will be disappointment. And sometimes, when we're working and laboring together, maybe we experience a little bit of disappointment or discouragement, even at that. But the question is, are we trying and are they trying? Right. And if so, then yes, it does take some patience in working with those around us. But for anything to function properly, every part that is knit and joined together must do its part for the building up of the body in love. Ephesians 4, verse 16. Josh, you got any last thoughts for us today?
Yeah, I want to just briefly close with a little bit of I guess you'd call it an anecdote. I've read a little historical perspective of the first century culture, and it was an honor-shame culture, and I think there's still a sense in which that exists today, maybe not to the same degree, but you would have society with ideals of what was honorable and what was shameful. And I would act in ways that were honorable to bring honor upon my family. I would avoid things that are shameful to avoid bringing shame upon my family. And it's all well and good. The problem is when what society deems honorable is against what God says is honorable. And that's what you have happening in the first century. Christians, all of a sudden, they start adopting these ideals that are what society deems shameful. And so what the society wants to do is wag their finger and shame them into submission. You've heard of cancel culture, haven't you? When somebody has an idea that everybody's up against, and then everybody's going to silence him or shun him for his idea. And so what Christians would do, as I've been reading, what Christians would do is they would band together as a community in an effort to insulate themselves from the societal pressures. And so you have churches, Christians joining together as a community to be able to have their own sense of community that is in some sense separate from the greater culture. My point there is what a blessing it is that God gave us other Christians to be able to join together with a sense of community in an effort to kind of insulate us from the around surrounding culture. But on the other side of that, what a blessing it is that God has given us work to do, but he's not expecting us to do it alone. He's given us a body that we can work with, that we can lock arms and join in the work together in order to accomplish the good that God has given us to do. And again, as we've already discussed, what a blessing it is that we have this group that can accomplish more than the sum of its parts. And so God's wisdom is displayed. Ephesians 3 talks about the manifold wisdom of God is displayed by the church. That's what it's talking about. You see the wisdom of God in the plan and the arrangement that he's given for the church. It displays the wisdom of God. And so what a blessing it is that we have that to be a part of, that body, that group to work together with, so that we can, it's not all on us. It's not all our responsibility. We have God to work with and God's people to work with.
Yeah. In fact, Ephesians 3 goes on to say that we are his workmanship created in him for good works. Richard, go ahead. Last thoughts.
I think that we really can't lose sight of the fact that working with others is hard. And there's going to be problems along the way because their personalities are different than ours. There are things that they think are going to work may not be what we think is going to work. There's just going to be difficulties. And if we think of ourselves as being the only one that's right on how to get this done, unless it's scripturally put forth, then, we're being self-centered. We have to be willing to put ourselves second and their ideas first. Now, again, I'm not talking about where the scriptures have spoken. We're limited there. We have to do it exactly the way the Lord says to do it. But some things, for instance, just by way of example, a song leader may want to sing a certain song before the Lord's Supper, where I would have picked a different song in that particular case. That's just a matter of opinion. But I'm going to have to go with him. He's the one that's leading the song. I'm going to have to yield my opinion to him and just go along with it and back him up. And all too often we see others not wanting to do that and working with others. We get stubborn hearts where we want to have our own way. We want to do it our way. And that's not going to accomplish anything. We have to be willing to work with others, and that does take practice.
Absolutely. And, God has equipped us for every good work. 2 Timothy 3, verse 16 and 17, through the scriptures, we are equipped for every good work. And as Philippians 2 points out as well, that we need to esteem the things of others, ahead of the things of ourselves. And to do that, it's going to cause us to work together, right? To be that close knit family that we are supposed to be. And so I hope this has given everyone things to think about. I hope that, as you consider your role, your place, wherever you are, as far as a local church is concerned, as serving God is concerned, what are you contributing and who are you helping in others' efforts to glorify God in the things that they do, and working together. And if nothing, then make a change. Make a change for sure. Thanks again for tuning in to Berean Spirits. Until next time, remember to search the scriptures with Berean Spirits.
Well, folks, that's all for today. Don't worry. Lord willing, the guys will be back next week for another Bible study on Berean Spirits. Until then, let the guys hear from you. Drop them some email at bereanspirits@gmail.com. They'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep studying that Bible.